Di mafrapo ute zolaun de porte o elubatu ute oe pulte wiona lifialenapi. Hello everybody and welcome. I am Batu. I speak Reef Napi and I was helping somebody else get started. Um, and I realized that while we have some really great videos on pronunciation for the forest dialect, we don't really have any videos, at least that I could find, for the forest dialect. So I figured I would just record the lesson that I had taught a couple of months ago on Calutral and throw them up here. So we're going to go ahead and do that. This is actually my second time recording this. The first time, ignore that. The first time it didn't really work out very well because I didn't want to pay to not have a giant freaking watermark. So now we're going to do it all in one go and hope for the best. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is go through all of the sounds quickly and easily, and that is for the people who just want a general overview of the sounds of the Reef dialect, whether that is somebody who is already been practicing forest and they just want to hear what some of the Reef differences are, or you just want to see if Reef sounds right for you, etc., etc. So I'm just going to go through all of the sounds really quickly. If you are here to actually learn the alphabet from the beginning, you can either listen to this and get that overview to start, or you can fast forward. I will have a timestamp in the video description with when I start the actual deeper dive and explanation into everything. And then at the end, I'm going to do some sample sentences. That way you can hear what the language actually sounds like being spoken and not just like repeating random words and saying sounds. So we're going to start with the easy stuff. Our consonants. These are all the consonants that sound similar to English or what you might expect them to sound like based on what Latin letter is used. So we have f, frappo, h, hahao, k, calutral, l, lor, m, ma, n, neitiri, p, po, s, sran, t, taron, v, vol, w, wion, y, yerik, and z, zakru. Then we have our slightly harder stuff. These are still consonants, but they are either not found in the English language or they don't quite sound the way that they do in Napi. So first up we have our tiftang, as in Natvi, ts, smook, r, run, sh, shao, ch, chip, ng, nga, g, g, b, be, d, dan, ohak, lop, and t, niwot. And then, last but certainly not least, we have what I like to call the fun stuff, which are our vowels plus. We have atan, a, ow, ilu, hei, utral, o, oe, and eltu. And then our four diphthongs, ewa, I, trai, eu, fueu, and ao, hahao. And our two pseudo vowels, l, ewil, and r, as in tr. Alrighty, and that is all of the speed run, essentially. So if you're just here for that little bit of refresher or hearing the differences, that is it. So we're going to go ahead and head on back to the easy stuff. I'm going to go through these with a little bit more detail and repetition. Again, since these are the easy ones, there's not as much to go through. So I'm just going to repeat them all a few times. So we have f, f, frappo, h, h, hahao, k, k, kelutral, l, l, lor, m, m, ma, n, n, neteri, p, p, po, s, s, sran, t, t, taron, v, v, vol, w, w, wion, y, y, yerik, and z, z, zakru. All right, you guys are a third of the way there. Totally. Definitely. All right, now we have that slightly harder stuff. So these are all still consonants, and there is a little bit more to discuss here and on the next slide, so there's going to be a little bit more conversation and a deeper dive. So from this point out, I'm basically assuming that you don't have much information about the alphabet and that you're totally beginning, and this might be one of the first videos you're watching. So I'm going to go ahead and explain things as if that were the case. So this first letter that we have, and yes, it is a letter, that apostrophe, is called a diphthong, which also means stop, kind of, in the language. And that is the like hitch in the back of your throat. And we do hear this in English rarely, but it is there, most notably in the word uh-oh. And if excuse me, and if you say Hawaii correctly, it is there as well. So it's that little hitch in the back of your throat that you kind of stop the air. Sorry, pause for a drink. So when that is put into a word, because you can't really just say it by itself, when that is put into a word, we have natvi, 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 as opposed to without it, which is incorrect, and you might hear people saying this, especially in randomly generated YouTube videos. Instead of navi, navi, we have natvi, natvi. And at this point, I guess, I probably should have talked about it before, but I also want to point out this underline that we have under the na. That is a stress marker on the first syllable. Natvi has stresses and they are irregular, so you just have to memorize them, which is my least favorite thing to hear and say. There are some tips and tricks and things that you'll learn along the way, but it is really just a memorization game when it comes to the stresses. All right, so that is the diphthong. Next, we have this TS, and even though it looks like it's two letters, it is one sound. It's one phoneme, and it is treated as one letter. Yeah, so if you're ever doing like crossword puzzles or anything like that, make sure that you know whether or not they are treating these multi character letters as one letter or two or three. So this TS we have as smook, ts, ts, smook. And it is the same sound that we hear in English. We don't have it at the beginning of words, unless they are loan words like tsunami. However, I think most people just drop the T sound and say tsunami. But we do have it in other words like cats. And so for that one and the NG at the bottom of this list, I kind of have the same advice. say a sentence with that sound in it, and then you just slowly start dropping the sounds around it. So you might say, my cats are cute, and then you say cats are cute, and then are cute, and then s. I hope that makes sense. So you just start dropping the sounds in front of and behind it until you're left just with that s sound, if that's something you're struggling with. I should have put the TS and the NG together, but what the heck? I think I went, no, I didn't. I don't know. Okay, next we have the R, which is r, r, run, run. And I'll talk about this more on the next slide when we get to the pseudo vowels, but the Na'vi do roll their R's. They have a trilled R. So this single R is a single tap of the tongue on the roof of your mouth. So again, that's r, r, run. All right, and then the next two are some fun reef-specific phonemes or sounds. So these letter combos, the SY and the TSY, we do see those in Forest. However, they pronounce them differently. There is 99% of the time not going to be a spelling change on these. So if you are learning Reef, you just have to remember that they are pronounced this way. If you're ever reading in your head or reading out loud. So the SY sound is sh, sh, shao, shao. And then the TSY is ch, ch, chip, chip. And this is a suffix that means cute and small. So we see this in like Nantang chip and Palukan chip, which are our earth dogs and cats. Yeah, so for these and the other ones I'm going to talk about soon, like I said, we don't typically change the spelling unless you really, really, really want to overemphasize the fact that you're speaking Reef. So a lot of times, not a lot of times, the only times I really see these spelling changes happen are in Reef-specific resources and like videos and stuff like that, specifically for teaching, to just kind of be a reminder that it's there. I don't necessarily like to do that because I think that it is important to remember to see things the way you're going to see them in the wild, quote unquote, but in general use and just build up the memory that that is what they sound like. All right, so next up we have the NG, which again, just like TS, is a single sound, even though it uses two characters. So that is ng, ng, nga, nga. And that is one you should get very familiar with because nga means you, and you're going to use it a lot. So just like with the TS, we have this sound, most notably in our ing ending for things. So you can say singing, and you have it in there twice. And then again, you just start dropping the sounds around it until you are comfortable with that specific sound. All right, the next three on the right-hand side, you're going to notice are there twice. So I'm going to kind of talk about them as two separate groups and then kind of sort of all as a whole. Well, no, I'm just going to talk about them as two separate groups. So the first group, so all of these are called ejectives. The first group are the ejectives if they come at the beginning of a word or a syllable. In Reef, we soften those sounds, and this helps the dialect to sound more flowy and watery and to fit that vibe and that theme. So at the beginning of a vowel, the KX is pronounced G, 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 G. The PX is pronounced B, B, Bay, Bay. And the TX is pronounced D, D, Don, Don. And notice that I specifically said it's pronounced that way, not that it's spelled that way. So this is another change that, according to Karipol and the Horen. Um, we shouldn't make these spelling changes unless we are wanting to emphasize the fact that we're speaking Reef. These changes, however, I do see more frequently, if not always, used by people who are speaking Reef, just generally in the community. So if you're in any of the Nitnabi Now forums and posts, or you are, well, or in classes and that kind of thing, people do make these spelling changes. Um, I do too. So yeah, I guess I don't know if there's really a reason why the community decided to make these changes and not the rest of them. Sorry, that's an alarm. Um, but yeah, I think the Horen did say that like these are more frequently changed in the spelling, um, and the other ones are like rarely, if ever, changed in the spelling. Um, I think it's helpful because see, now I'm contradicting myself because I said with the sh and the ch, just learn to pronounce them that way. But that's because no matter where they are in the word, they're pronounced that way. The ejectives have a different pronunciation based on where they are in the word. And so if you don't change the spelling, then you just have to be able to tell, you just have to learn where the syllable break is, and that can be more confusing and harder. So I would venture a guess with very little knowledge as to that being a major factor as to why we make the changes, but um, I digress. So yeah, we have g, b, and d. Um, if the ejectives are at the beginning of the word or the syllable. So, for example, not pictured here, but we have galde means hello. In forest, that's obviously galde. Um, but in Reef, we say galde. Yeah. All right, and then we have ejectives if they are in the middle of or at the end of a syllable. So if they're anywhere except the beginning, um, then they retain that ejective clicking sound. So we have the KX is ohak. We have the PX is lop, lop. And I'm hoping that's coming through on the microphone. Oh. And the TX we have is newot, newot. And these sounds are made. So if you, and don't be afraid, like, I know I guess it's not helpful because I'm a VTuber right now. But don't be afraid to like make silly faces, look at yourself in the mirror, that kind of stuff, in order to see what your mouth and your face is doing while you're pronouncing letters, because it's going to help you to understand what you're doing right and what you might be doing wrong. And for these three in particular, you need to be forceful with your air and expel it through the part of your mouth that is closed. So for the KX, the part that's closed is the back of your throat. For PX, it's your lips. And for the TX, it's your teeth. Um, yeah. And then obviously these are different than the regular k, p, and t. And so you can kind of go back and forth and go k, 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 and kind of feel how they're similar. Um, and use the K, P, and T as your base. And then add in that ejective popping, clicking sound to it. So hopefully that made sense. All right. Now we have the fun stuff, vowels. So in Reef, not V, we have 8 vowels. And one thing that is fun to note is that vowels are all their own syllable. So even when we have words like the second one on the left there that are 2 vowels put together, or the third one down on the right, 2 vowels put together, those words, as you can see by the underline, actually have 2 syllables. Um, So, yeah, I was going somewhere with that. I'll get there in a second. So for the A, um, first on the left, that sounds like ah, ah, a ton, a ton. And then the A with the, I almost said exclamation point. What is that? An umlaut. The A with the accent is ah, ah, ow, ow. And then the I is e, e, ilu. And the accented I is I, I, hey, hey. The U is u, u, utral, utral. Accented U is uh, um, um. The O is o, oe, oe. And then we have the E, which is eltu, eltu. All right, so I'm going to go back and talk about two things here that are completely different. They just happen to be in the vowel stuff. So for the accented I, the I sound, I use the word hey as my demonstrator, I guess. And I specifically picked this word because in forest, not V, it has a diphthong in between the accented I and the unaccented I. And so I picked this word to show, and I don't know if this counts as a grammar thing or a pronunciation thing, but I'm going to talk about it here because it's important. In Reef, not V, we drop the diphthong between two different vowels, and you may choose to drop the diphthong between two of the same vowels unless it would put three or more together, if that makes sense. So he in forest is pronounced hit-e, hit-e, and in reef it's he, hit-e, he. And this is another place where we see reef having that softer, more flowy, watery feel. Yeah, so like I said, it is obligatory to drop it between different vowels and optional to drop it between the same vowels. And this is another thing that you may or may not see written out. I would say it's kind of 50-50. Like sometimes people drop it and sometimes people don't. It really depends. I think if you're using the D, B, and G spellings, you should probably drop the diphthong as well. Otherwise, you're probably going to get corrected. But yeah. You can also, I don't have internet right now. I was originally going to show like some other things on the web at the end of this to be helpful, but I can't do that anymore. But you can take the Reef spelling versions. I don't know if they'll accept SH and the CH. But the words with dropped diphthongs and the D, G, and B, you can take those into all of the dictionaries that have a search function like Fuel and Reguño, as long as you have the Yes Reef box checked. And search those and it'll still pop up. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is the owe with the asterisk. So Na'vi is a phonetic language, which means that all of the sounds sound like they sound all of the time. So every time you see an A, every time you see a W, every time you see any of the letters written out, they always sound the same. Um, some quote unquote caveats with that being that PX, TX. Oh god, what's the other one? The ejectives at the start of the sound, they're going to sound different if you're speaking Reef, but they're always going to sound different. It's not based on other stuff that's around it or other things that might change. The difference here is specifically with the word oe, and not with the sound o, but specifically with the word oe. And when it is by itself, which means I, by the way, I or me, by itself it is oe, and it is 2 syllables, oe. When it takes case endings, which you'll learn about in later lessons for sure, it turns into, well, it depends on the case ending, I guess, but that OE, the OE becomes W, a W sound. So OE with the case ending, with the L case ending, so you don't need to know what that means, but it would become well. So OEL is pronounced well, well, and weti and weru, etc., etc. Yeah. And honestly, if you forget that and you just say well like quickly enough, your face just kind of does that anyway, which is part of why I said stare at yourself while you're speaking, because you're going to notice these things that happen naturally. And a lot of these changes that are made, um, like turning those ejectives into the softer sounds, like turning the oe into we, etc. Those are ways to force a conlang to do things that happen naturally in language over time. Okay, anyway, so then we have our diphthongs, which is a fun word for like 2 sounds put together to make a single sound. So these ones can definitely trip people up, especially in the listening practices. So just go slow and listen and hear it and transcribe when other people are talking. And then try to search for those words and see if you can find them in the dictionary. And if you can, then you heard them right. If you can't, then you probably heard the wrong ones. But yeah, so the EY is a, a, awa, awa. And you get that obviously by putting the e from L2 with the y of Yerik. A. Then we have I, srai, srai. Then we have eu, eu, fueu, fueu. And we have ao, ao, for hahao, hahao. So a, I, eu, ao. Which, when you say them individually like that, all sound very different. When you say them in sentences, sometimes it's a struggle. All right, and then, last but not least, we have what are called pseudo vowels, which doesn't mean anything to you right now, and that's totally fine. This really only matters when it comes to lenition or like syllable creation and structure and that kind of thing. So the double L, which is my personal least favorite letter, is basically just your L sound, but longer. So we have L, L for ewl, ewl. And the double R is that trilled R I talked about earlier. So we have R, R, tr, tr. And if trilling your R's is something that you struggle with, there are lots and lots of really good videos out there that'll teach you how to do it. Unfortunately for all of you guys, it comes incredibly naturally to me. So I don't really know how to teach it other than to say just do it a bunch of times. Yeah, so if you need resources for learning how to trill your R, honestly just do a YouTube search for rolled R's, trilled R's, Spanish R's, etc., etc. Watch a lot of videos because people are going to teach it differently. Everybody has like their own little special unique tip. So if you watch 2 videos, 5 videos, 10 videos, and you're still struggling, just keep watching more videos. And eventually, I promise, I hate to say it, but I promise something's going to click. Something's going to make sense. And then on top of that, don't give up. Keep practicing. Keep working at it because again, eventually it's going to click. And caveat, not caveat, but in addition to that, don't let struggling with the pronunciation, especially struggling with rolling your R's, don't let that stop you from speaking and practicing and sending voice memos and saying things out loud because the only way you're going to get comfortable with it and the only way you're going to get good at it is by doing it. And that is the case with everything, but it is especially the case with languages. And it is especially the case with Natvi because Natvi is a spoken only asterisk language. And it canonically was designed and created that way. There was no writing system until the humans came along. So the more you can speak it, the more you can listen to it, the more you can take the interactive lessons with people speaking it, the better it is for everybody. And especially for you. All right. So that being said, that is the actual alphabet. That is the explanation. That is all of that stuff. So feel free to head out if you are only here for listening to the alphabet. But I am going to do a couple of example sentences and practice. And I'm going to show all of them. That way you can pause and you can work on them yourself. These were originally, obviously, dialogues back and forth. So if you can find a friend or somebody to practice with, definitely do that and actually have that dialogue back and forth. And it is important for me, I really want to say here that it doesn't matter what you're saying. You don't need to know what the words are that you're saying. Right now, what's more important is that you're saying the words fluidly and it's sounding like you're talking. And you'll learn over time what the words mean and you'll be able to create your own sentences and that kind of stuff. But right now, when you're working on pronunciation, it only matters that you're saying the sounds right. So, yeah. So I'm just going to do both parts back and forth. Kade maralu ki maninat ngaruluf pom thrak srane weruluf pom ngarutat srane hayalovai hayalovai. This did remind me actually, and I should have said this earlier, but the accented U is not in forest. Well, we don't write it in forest Natvi. The sound is there, but they just like combined the 2 U's, so they don't really differentiate in the spelling. So you don't see it written out very much. Again, unless it's a forest or it's a reef specific class. And it's just up to you as someone who speaks reef to like memorize the list of words that have instead of ooh. So yeah, I'm working on that one still. I got flashcards though. All right, the next practice dialogue. Wow, that was hard. We have Trlef pom kade ngaruf ko shau pefia weru shau reela ngarutat weru shau panu hayalo vai marela hayalo vai ma panu. For this one we have Kade maperal, kade fueu wel netiriti, netiril kel kutipok, po hahao, irayo, ewangahu, ton lefbom. Rude ma eveng, ngayom fe mautiti. Ke he, wel mautiti ke neo yivom. Nga neo tsau slivus rak, Sran. Ngayong. I wrote that one myself. I'm quite proud of it. And then we have, last but not least, this one looks more complex than it really is. And again, you don't have to know what you're saying at this point. You just have to say it. So we have fitr menga taron yarikit ngazene nevume wiya setaronti welwat ke dugefu owe nga lengu ketstun oe shaum. And then you might notice this secret thing we didn't talk about, listed at the bottom here. So this is where I get to admit that I totally lied. Ish. When I said that things were phonetic and sounds didn't change based on what was around them. Again, not entirely true. You'll learn about lenition and other stuff like that later. But those are typically reflected in spelling changes, at least in terms of lenition. We do have another one here in Reef that the spelling doesn't change, but the sound changes. So we have two words here, two examples. We have sataronti and langu. And this is when it is important to know your stresses. Because if that a sound, the a with the umlaut, is in an unstressed syllable, in Reef, we can, optionally, turn it into the e sound from the e. So sataronti becomes setaronti. And langu becomes lengu. And it's subtle, it's different, and that's also one of those things that just happens over time. As you speak it quickly, as you speak it fluidly and fluently, those things just kind of happen. And it was put into grammar and the rules in this particular case. So that is it. That is all that I have for you guys. Like I said earlier, I don't have internet. Otherwise, I would show you a few resources like the dictionaries and Gelutral. If you somehow got here and you're not from Gelutral, you're not a part of it, I highly recommend you check it out. We have a really awesome Discord server with classes every week, multiple classes every week, sometimes classes every day, with different aspects and lots of people to practice with. You can find a learning buddy to help you learn. We have lots of garu who will answer your questions. We have some people who do like tutoring office hour sessions that are one-on-one, and you can get specific feedback and those kinds of things. And it's a really awesome place. And then one thing I highly recommend doing as well, and I will link to it in the show notes, but there's a document with almost 40 tongue twisters. Actually, you know what? I'm going to pull it up on my phone right now and do a couple because they are so much fun. I absolutely love them, and I highly recommend, especially while you're working on pronunciation, especially while you're still learning that step because it is difficult, that you do a couple tongue twisters every day. Like I said, they're totally fun, and they're hard. They're hard for everybody. Everybody messes up, and that's how you learn. Sorry, it's loading. Okay. The list was originally put together by Yana Unil, um, and I think a couple other people. Um, and these tongue twisters aren't grammatically correct. They don't necessarily mean anything, which again is great because it means you're not thinking about what the words mean. You're thinking about what they sound like. So I'm going to do just a couple of my favorites so you can kind of hear what some of them sound like. Number 2 is mra frtu si lurto ka mr si mra ngr si vrte pa mr wrpa fa nerfa sorry wrpa fa nerfena urta pergenter kr si sriri ne hrra volfeerfen urtati kro kro. See, it's okay to mess up. And then number 4 I really like because it sounds like an English one to me. I don't know why. It is tute letete ute tute luteng tute lutute tutepe. Number 6 usually scares a lot of people. It has what I believe is the longest, like the word with the most amount of syllables in the language because it is a quadrillion vowels. And like I said earlier, each vowel is its own sentence, or sorry, its own syllable. Um, and it is important in Reef that you get used to changing your mouth shape around the different vowels as they're mushed together because removing that diphthong removes that barrier um, in between those vowels when it's there. Like removing it takes away that barrier, and there are more times that you have to say the vowels together, if that makes sense. So number 6 is aoioa, mea unio ea oio, oe iaia. And then some of these that look really hard are actually really easy if you're doing them in Reef. So, oh, I hate that one. Where are some of the ejectives ones? Let's do, this will be the last one. We're going to do number 27. Ludanatana, Ludanatana, Tanhe, Adanatan, Dana, Atan, Adan. All right. So thank you very much, Irayo, for studying with me, for taking classes in the class, for watching this video, for sharing it, etc., etc. Join Galutral. Happy to help anybody who needs it. Although I've been told I'm intermediate, but that's very scary. Um, so yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking around. See you in the server. Happy learning, etc., etc. Ewangahu ute hayalavai.